podcast about seminal Manchester band, The Smiths.
Yes, I think we should. I think if the viewers don't know, we stumbled upon a subject that Melissa and I have a difference in opinion. It happened in a podcast a bit ago where she said that she would prefer to sit down at lunch with Johnny Marr, and I said, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" Because how can you choose Johnny Marr over Morrissey? And then she laid this whole thing on me, this guilt trip about how Morrissey has, I suppose, spiraled downward into this racist, xenophobic, anti-Semite, homophobic, I don't know, misogynist, like every single term they throw at him these days, right?
I don't think I said misogynist or anti-Semite, but he is a xenophobic. I have done more research into this since, and yeah, he is anti-Islam. That's for certain, even on his own website. He also is a part of.
That's for certain? Even on his own. What does it say? Anti-Islam on his website? How did you gather that it's a certainty?
He has a website called Morrissey Central,
Mm-hmm.
where he does his own interviews with people because he doesn't trust the press. And I mean, naturally, because the press does say things about him, and some that I have found to be, I agree, are taken out of context. But he has interviews of things where he talks about Islamic people and Muslims. And
Mm-hmm.
essentially, yeah, he believes in what they, I mean, he always brings things back to animal slaughter. But yeah, he said some pretty negative things. That's xenophobia. But I don't think he's a misogynist either at all.
No, that might have been a label too far, but definitely gets called a racist and a xenophobe. And what you just said was baseless and had no actual gravity to it at all. But what I found interesting is that you sent me an article, and the article was 35 of Morrissey's most controversial quotes. Quotes, right? And there's no context. So what I did, Melissa, is I spent 5 hours today, and I sourced
Wow.
out every single quote on that page.
Good for you, because let me just interrupt and say that when I talked about doing this last week, the reason I even mentioned us doing this was because when I rewatched our Morrissey Marr debate, I was cracking up about it, and then I went into a Smiths phase where I was listening to Smiths really aggressively again, and I felt attached to Morrissey again because without him, it's not the Smiths. Even though I believe that Johnny Marr wrote all that music, without those lyrics and that vocal style, I mean, the magic is within both of them. And so I started feeling sentimental towards Morrissey, and I was like, man, it really sucks to look at him this way. I should probably do more research into this because it's very easy for people to jump on a boat with pitchforks these days and cancel somebody. And I was wondering if that was fair, because I remember flashing back to documentaries on Morrissey where Morrissey was like, I love the Mexican people. They're beautiful people. I mean, it's like some of his biggest fans, his biggest audiences. He's like the fucking Beatles in Mexico. So
Mm.
I was like, how can Morrissey be a racist if he likes Latin people and he lives in Los Angeles? But yeah, so I wanted to talk about this because there's so much in the world that we're living in with cancel culture. And I wonder if it's fair for us to do a disservice to ourselves to cancel something that was so important to us at some point. I'll never cancel the Smiths. But yeah, supporting Morrissey, because let's track back is why even the conversation originally happened between us about Morrissey was because my band was going to play a festival with Morrissey. And I was like, oh, whatever about playing with Morrissey. The Violet Femmes and Psychedelic Furs and Blondie and Devo are playing. I mean, the list was huge of great bands. But the fact that I was not even appreciative of being able to play a show with Morrissey even surprised myself, because 15-year-old me would have been like so ecstatic and couldn't even, if you told me then, hey, you would be offered a show in 20 plus years or whatever to to play with Morrissey, I wouldn't have believed that. So because basically there's moments in my life, like for instance, when I worked in Amoeba, Duran Duran was doing a signing, and I had the opportunity to meet them if I had just asked, and I didn't do that. And there's random things like that in my life where I'm like, why didn't I do that? just because I didn't get motivated. And I even remember in the early 2000s when you and I went to the Museum of Television and Radio, I was nervous to meet the woman who helped create the look of Miss Piggy because she looked like Miss Piggy. And I was really nervous about it. And you were like, no way. And you forced that to happen. And I'm really glad that that happened. So with having had the opportunity to play with Morrissey and not making a deal of it, yeah, it's kind of odd to me because at some point that would have been really important to me. So yeah, when I guess I just needed to get back into the mindset of what the importance of Morrissey was to me, rather than jumping on the boat that a lot of people do these days of like, this person said that, they're trash, and canceling them completely. So yeah, then I had a revisit into the Smiths again, and felt all those feelings again, and even more so because every time, even like, I'm sure this happens to most people, as we revisit things, we kind of get further into it than we ever had before. And with a band like the Smiths that a lot of us have been obsessed with many times over in our lives, to fall in love with them again, I mean, it feels so like passionate and spiritual, which is also why I can understand the people that do cancel somebody based on their political views, even though they love their art, is because it's so personal, because it's so spiritual, that they feel like betrayed or something. Billy Bragg actually had a quote, and I think they were buds in the 80s, but he said, this is from an article that we'll get into what Nick Cave says, because it's an article actually that really focuses on what Nick Cave says about Morrissey. But the beginning of the article starts with fellow Brit music legend Billy Bragg recently came out and said the former Smiths singer has, quote unquote, betrayed and, quote unquote, broken the hearts of Smiths fans worldwide. The Smiths express a lot of people's own sense of disconnect with society and help them to find their own identity, and he's totally trashed that, Bragg argued. Meanwhile, the world's oldest record store has ceased selling Morrissey's music, and several radio stations banned him from their airwaves. Which, even when I read that, I was like, damn, that's kind of extreme.
It's totally extreme. Yeah.
Where art, like, beyond the person's political beliefs, like, how can you see? Nick Cave gets into this in the article where he talks about it being a disservice to yourself. And I thought that was a sentiment I ultimately feel. It's a disservice to you as a fan, and it's a disservice to the public, and a disservice to like everyone who was in the Smiths with Morrissey, to deny, especially something in the UK that was as huge in the UK. Like the Smiths never broke in like the top 10 in America. It's kind of more identifiable with subculture to me, but I also didn't grow up. I mean, the Smiths existed 82 to 87, only 5 years, which is crazy for that kind of impact within 5 years. And I feel that, imagine a band like that. They kind of defined probably the 80s for a lot of people growing up at that time, especially in the UK. But for us, because we are younger, even its impact on us though was massive and huge. But yeah, on a subculture basis, it's just weird to me that anybody would completely just let's erase its huge impact. And to me, it's so British that if I had any kind of like, I don't know, if I was from the UK, I think I'd be even more upset about it.
In The Guardian, how they gave him a 1 star for the album that was being banned from record shops, California Sun. And I mean, no Morrissey album deserves 1 star. It's impossible, I mean, he's a gifted musician. He's so talented, and you don't have to love him or like him, but you have to give him the credit he deserves, and they're giving him 0. There is definitely a lean towards canceling Morrissey. I mean...
yeah, collectively around the world. Even when we were going to play that festival, the Cruel World Festival, everyone's comments were Morrissey with a vomit emoji. A lot of people are just, I get it. We live in a time where a lot of people have white guilt. I don't, because I come from an immigrant mother who's from Chile, and when I lived in Miami early on and we lived in government housing, I wasn't around people with money. So I've always had contempt for people that, do have money and do have privilege. I don't. I understand that I've had privileges for appearing white and talking white essentially, um, but I don't 100% think that cancel culture is good. I do think that us shining light on people that are oppressed, women and people of color, um, and the homeless and the mentally ill and drug addicts, and I think it's really important. And yeah, we get fed up with this continuing on because yeah, it's 2021 and we still suffer from these issues. However, we talked about gunning for people like this, like Morrissey. It's I think mainly because he's in the public eye, so he has a voice and people expect more. And it's shocking when yeah, you're part of a subculture and you represent like this. I'm sure a lot of people growing up queer and just felt unheard, unseen, or just weird, the outcasts in their community. For somebody that they looked up to, that they felt represented them to say these things, yeah, it's makes sense why people get so emotionally involved. But yeah, I think it's important to do our research rather than jumping into it. So I want to know what research you did behind it to see, because when I looked further into it, the misogyny and the transphobic stuff I could not find. I actually watched a Larry King interview, Morrissey, where the way that he talked about women was really positive, and the way that he talked about Black people was really positive. He actually had brought up, because it was during the Obama administration that this interview came in, that he felt Obama wasn't doing enough for his people during Ferguson. And he brought up the police back then and police brutality against Black people. So it's funny because those things don't get brought up. And when I saw, and I watched this interview last night, and I was just like, wow, okay. It's funny how like if you just open up any interview, Morrissey, he does say things that seem like he still is aligned politically with what most of his fans feel. But the for Britain, like political party, yeah, I mean, that does not look good.
I think we're going to go over these quotes and we're going to see the context surrounding it, and we'll judge for ourselves, right? There's 35 of them. So are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so from the article you sent me, we have the first two quotes. So the first one is, the modern loony left seemed to forget that Hitler was left-wing. But of course, we're all called racist now, and the word is actually meaningless. I'm being called racist. When someone calls you racist, what they are saying is, you actually have a point and I don't know how to answer it. So perhaps if I distract you by calling you a bigot, we'll both forget how enlightened your comment was. So on the face of these two quotes, do you have any issue with either one?
Mainly that he just sounds really arrogant on the latter, saying like, "Oh, how enlightened your comment is. I'm so enlightened, so you're just gonna ignore it by saying something like calling me a bigot." I mean, that sounds a little silly, but also, I did not look into this, which I meant to. If Adolf Hitler was left wing,
the party was the National Socialistic Party, and socialism is on the left, right?
Right.
So I think he's referring to the fact that he came to power with this title of being on the left. And maybe that's dangerous, that bad things can be packaged in a deceiving kind of a way.
I do think in recent years, people who are like liberals and left, and I see this from my own Instagram feed. It's weird to me how hypocritical everybody is and how easily they jump on the bandwagon of different things because of the Capitol that just happened. All the same people that were anti-police are all asking, where are the cops? Why aren't the cops there? I mean, truth is there was hella less cops than there was during Black Lives Matter protests. There really was. And I do believe that there's factions in the police department that are white supremacists. It's been history of time in America, but I think it's ironic that we so easily arrest those people. It's like, well, I mean, the thing is that you also want the ability to protest, and you also defend damage of property. So why, like, to me, when I saw the Capitol happening, I didn't feel patriotic and American where I'm like, they're damaging property. I felt like, wow, like, congrats to the Republican Party for ruining the Republican Party.
Yeah,
You know,
really, they jumped the shark in the biggest way possible.
fight. Like, this is awesome. They're out there fucking fighting each other. Like, how
Yeah.
incredible is that? How fucking stupid do they look? You know.
Mm.
But I could, I just see that the way cancel culture works and the way the left wing works and people's expectations of certain things. Nobody finds the irony in half of the crap that they're saying.
Hmm.
And I think it's like to constantly serve your own agenda without looking at your own hypocrisies, like kind of silly. So I get that the left is loony for sure.
This is where those quotes were pulled. So John, the interviewer, says, "Why do you think the press suddenly see you as a difficult figure?" Morrissey, "Because I speak from the heart. The mainstream media will only encourage pop artists who have nothing to say. We are meant to keep our nose out of politics, even though we are all living, breathing humans and as much a part of 2018 life as anyone else." John, "Your last album was dedicated to Dick Gregory, yet a question of racism has always chased you through the press." Morrissey, "People accuse, yes, but they can't penetrate or illuminate. The sole point of all of those NME slurs was to turn my audience against me. I recall one NME piece many years ago which addressed its readers with, 'We just can't turn you off him, can we?' That said it all. And as far as racism goes, the modern loony left seemed to forget that Hitler was left-wing. But of course, we're all called racist now, and the word is actually meaningless. It's just a way of changing the subject. When someone calls you racist, what they're saying is, you actually have a point, and I don't know how to answer it. So perhaps, if I distract you by calling you a bigot, we'll both forget how enlightened your comment was." So I don't know. Do you know who Dick Gregory is? Or
No,
was?
you.
An amazing individual. I have had great time watching just about everything I can find on that man on YouTube. I recommend it to anyone watching Dick Gregory. An incredible individual. We would have never seen the Zapruder tapes with the John F. Kennedy murder if it weren't for him. He brought that to light. He was an amazing comedian and so prophetic and such an activist. And I love how that is completely omitted out of the context of this quote, which is basically trying to make Morrissey appear racist. The fact that his last album was dedicated to Dick Gregory. I mean, Dick Gregory suffers no fool, okay? Dick Gregory suffers no fool. And here he is with Morrissey in this picture. If you could see that. Okay.
So he's color.
That's Dick Gregory, and he died, okay? And this is what Morrissey said in 2017, August 20th. "Dick Gregory, America's last hope, dies, aged 84. He knew how all aspects of the human condition connect to politics. He was a man of thought and a man of action, when most of us cannot manage to be just one of either. He worked breathlessly, work, words, deeds. He demanded for all what was snatched by the few. He disturbed the White House, and he was too quick for the American print media. They will be pleased that he now ceases to be amongst us, as we are left with earth-threatening Trump, who will race into war in search of peace." You know, what Morrissey said about race was a response to the interviewer asking about Dick Gregory. And I feel as though the media and all of these different articles that are pointing out these quotes will never cite Dick Gregory in the article, because God forbid they popularize that man and his dangerous ideas, you know? And there's Morrissey dedicating his album, basically promoting his name, trying to get it out there. And I think it's just demonstrably that Morrissey...
So, theory as to why the media turns so harshly on Morrissey, because I will
Truth.
say that truth. Well,
They're after the
look,
truth. They want to kill
when
it.
I did a post on Instagram stories, which was like a poll, and I said, doing a podcast on the Smiths, curious what, who your favorite is, Morrissey or Marr now, and why. And a lot of people did not give me any why evidence. They just said Morrissey is a douchebag. Morrissey is a racist. I side with the oppressed. And it's like, well, of course, I side with the oppressed as well, but I want to know exactly why. A lot of people some of them gave me interesting answers. A lot of the people I didn't know. And a lot of them said that, like, they thought that for someone who's so strongly about animal rights, that he doesn't care about human rights. When I went further into his immigration stuff, he has said that he believes that Britain is forever changing with immigrants and will never be the same Britain. And I think that's why he's for that political party for Britain, because their immigration policies. I'm curious how you feel about that, because for me, I believe the world is always changing. People always migrate to different areas. You can never keep a country a single like race or culture about it, and I think that's kind of beautiful. That's how the world progresses. Like, for me, I think open all borders. I don't know. I'm not into the idea of preventing people from going places. As you know, my mother to me is so much like the American dream. One of 14 kids, living during Pinochet, which, you know, was a dictator, and shot people in the street. And my mom escaped that, came to America, not even speaking this language, struggled super hard living in New York City, trying to learn the language, cleaning people's fucking toilets. And look at her now. She's a total boss. She bought her house straight cash because she's a hustler. You know, and I respect that so much. And I essentially do for money what she did too, in terms of like finding stuff and reselling it. So, you know, I believe, and my mother's also so proud to like be here. Every time growing up, well, into like any political punk band when I was a kid, and being like, fuck America in this really kind of ignorant way, she would get upset because she told me that it's a privilege that I'm born here. And she's right. I had more opportunity. She lived in a shack, you know? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I believe people should be able to restart their lives anywhere. I think Morrissey's quote, I think often he's also mentioning Islam. So to me, it comes from this ignorant fear of, with religion comes terrorism. And I can almost understand that in some regard, because people are always killing in the name of religion, right? You know, I mean, that people do that often. It's literally through the history of time. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering how you feel about that.
I think he's just speaking on his observation of what is plain to see, and I don't think you can just be so quick to call it Islamophobic. I think he observes how England is changing, and, you know, some could love that change, some could hate that change, some could be neutral about the change. I think he's just speaking on his observation. Again, I think he's speaking his truth. And I think it's undeniable that England is changing. I think what he saw as England growing up is something that he liked, and he doesn't see as much of it anymore. And I don't know if you can hold it against him, because Morrissey has never voted in his life. He's not political. He's just making observations. And I think that's...
He's never voted, but it is weird to get on public television wearing a political party pin, which shows support for a political party. So he might have changed since then. And even if you pull up the Wikipedia, by the way, for the For Britain movement, mm-hmm. It's a far-right political party founded by an anti-Islam activist. So the moment that you support that, you are supporting, you know, those ideals and that ideology. So it's tough because, you know, this party actually was started by a woman, but there's different people part of it who are Holocaust deniers. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think it's kind of it's mainly, I think that this was the tipping point for people. And I can see why. And I know Morris is trying to get out of it by saying I've never voted, but
what is his statement on why he supports it? Do you know what he said in terms of why he supports it?
It's because of the borders. He believes that that's not what it is.
That's not what he says.
All right. Well, you tell me what information you have.
Well, I only have what I've read from what he has said, and I don't put it past Morrissey to put on a pin that will provoke. I think he might enjoy the fact that people get him misunderstood because he's able to defend himself, and I don't think he shies away from that. And the other thing I don't think he shies away from is speaking his mind. So if he really does support that group based on its anti-Islam policies, I think he would come out and say that. I don't think he would be reserved about it. I think he's not shy in that regard. So there's the quote from the 35 quotes, the controversial quotes, and this quote is, "On the far-right political party for Britain. For Britain seem to say what many British people are currently thinking, which is why the BBC or Channel 4 News will not acknowledge them. Because, well, for Britain would change British politics forever." So that quote was taken again from the 2018 interview, and the interviewer asks, "You say you have never known a British political party that represents your views." Morrissey, "There is a new party called For Britain. They have the best approach to animal welfare, whereas no other party even bothers to mention animal welfare. The EU will not protect animals from halal or kosher practice. For Britain seem to say what many British people are currently thinking, which is why the BBC or Channel 4 News will not acknowledge them. Because, well, for Britain would change British politics forever. And we can't have that. If you love animals, you really cannot vote Labour or Conservative. Give animals a break. They've done enough for you. Let them live." So he wore the button, and this might be a genius move on his part. I don't know, right? He wore the button. It got a lot of attention because it's like a hot button that signifies alt-right membership and so forth, which would lead individuals with an objective way of thinking about things that want to see the whole picture before they make up their mind to research why he wore it. And they would come up with something like this because this is what he said. He said that his interest in them and the reason why he has any sort of affiliation with them is their animal welfare policies.
I'm curious what their animal welfare policy is. I know Morrissey has always been for animal rights, and he's
hardcore about it too. He's not just like on the surface, right?
Oh, I mean, my buddies toured with him, and unfortunately, they played the Hollywood Bowl. But my bandmate Eddie had just passed away, and I had the opportunity to go, and I wanted to go before I even knew I was going to play this festival, because I was like, maybe I could meet Morrissey. You never know. And I didn't end up going because of the personal stuff that was happening. But yeah, there's not allowed to be any animal products at the shows for anybody.
Yeah, he'll pull the plug quick. And, he has said this for decades. It's no surprise that he's hardcore vegan and has very strong views on the way animals are treated. And, I mean, if both the Labour and the other party don't have any sort of acknowledgement of animal welfare, and this party does, I can see him putting the pin on for that alone. I don't know that for a fact, just going off what he says, and he does say other things in other quotes that do reference Islam and their practices and so forth, so it gets a little murky. But this particular quote that's in the 35 quotes is being controversial. If you look at the context, there really, and you tell me, is nothing to hold against him in this quote.
I feel that when I read the 35 quotes, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was one about Islam that was pretty sketchy.
Yeah, there's a couple. We can get to them. On Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, tells us about neighborhood policing. What is policing? He tells us London is amazing city. What is amazing? This is the mayor of London, and he cannot talk properly. I saw an interview where he was discussing mental health, and he repeatedly said mental. He could not say the words mental health, so that's the quote on Sadiq Khan. This comes from the interview. John, the interviewer, asked, London has become a murder capital. London has become a murder capital recently. Morrissey, London is debased. The mayor of London tells us about neighborhood police. And what is policing? He tells us London is an amazing city. What is amazing? This is the mayor of London. He cannot talk properly. I saw an interview where he's discussing mental health, and he repeatedly said mental. He could not say the words mental health. The mayor of London. Civilization is over. So I don't think it's because of his color or his background. I think Morrissey is just someone who would appreciate the mayor of London to speak proper, English. And that might be a stuffy, arrogant kind of a position to have, but he should be granted it. And there's really nothing that I think is offensive of someone preferring the mayor of London to speak proper English. I also don't think there's anything offensive for someone who would like to see the mayor of London, do completely different, or speak completely differently. I just think that's a preference.
Morrissey's opinion on that to me is pretty silly. I also remember being around my mother and her being insulted for not speaking correct English. So for me personally, that hits a point where I'm like, get the stick up out of your ass, because there's nothing to focus on, because he can't pronunciate English words correctly. Who cares?
Well, he does. Morrissey cares. He's a linguist, he's a linguist. He's
That's the type of person that I attribute to a privileged white person who corrects my English. I have a 9th grade education, but look at me. I got my own business. I have successful bands. I personally feel like I should give myself a pat on the back because I didn't need schooling. And English language changes as we progress as humans. And so what? Why keep things traditional? Who cares? I'm into adapting to the way the world changes and people change and language changes. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are, maybe Morrissey has a different aspect because part of, he's a really great writer. And, I write terrible lyrics. So maybe that has something to do. He's an intellectual on a different basis. And I respect his right to do that and be that. He is entitled to his opinion about it, but I think it's silly, honestly, to focus on the way people speak. But go on. I believe there's more anti-Islam quotes that come from him. Because so far I've not.
Yeah. I think it's, a bit silly as well to be concerned about the manner of speech. I think it's more important the actions and the deeds of a person, right? What is the result of this speech? Has it hurt anyone? That sort of thing. And he's just picking on the speech, right? And he's got a problem with just the speech, and that's his prerogative. I don't necessarily hold the same opinion, but I just don't think you can hold it against him.
Well, not as something necessarily racist. It's just kind of stupid. But it's stupid to me. But my question also is, because I tried to, while we were talking, look this up, and I have not found a simple answer for this. But I'm wondering, Morrissey's opinions on the UK, does he even live there anymore? Because the last I remember, he's been living in Los Angeles.
In LA, yeah.
He also supports Brexit. And I wish I knew more about Brexit further to comment further on it, but from what I got the impression from when I've been touring the UK and my friends from the UK, that Brexit is a terrible idea for a lot of reasons. And I don't know why Morrissey supports it. I think he just seems like he's for nationalism or something.
Right. That's definitely one of the problematic things about Morrissey is his support for Brexit, and a lot of people have very strong feelings about Brexit, and fair enough, because it could be a disaster to many people who want to travel freely back and forth, work overseas, and so on. There is a quote directly about that. Let me find it here. The quote is, on immigration, although I don't have anything against people from other countries, the higher the influx into England, the more the British identity disappears. Now, on its face, I just feel as though that's a statement of his truth. I don't see it being inflammatory in any which way. He starts off, I don't have anything against people from other countries. The higher the influx into England, the more the British identity disappears. That is true.
Yeah, he's not wrong because that's true. The more that different cultures come in, the less whatever the British identity is.
Exactly,
But
whatever that is, fish and chips. Hello, Governor, pip pip, Mary Poppins. Whatever you think that is, and whatever how
yeah,
silly it
like
is
I
fading away as more people move in. Sure.
but like I said earlier, that's just with the progression of time, things change, things evolved. I feel like living in America, when people say bullshit like that, is the dumbest thing in the world because we are clearly um, entirely built of immigrants from Europe, from Africa, from like, I mean, we're from all over the place. So when people refer
Totally.
to it here, I'm like, that's silly. Britain goes a lot further back. So I get why he says that in some regard. I mean,
Well,
he's not
if you
wrong.
want to,
Go to Britain. I mean, there's a lot of different people there.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I've never been there first. I've never stepped foot over
that
there,
is
so I wouldn't
crazy.
know firsthand. I know I'm so
Um,
close too.
yeah. Well, when pandemic is over, I highly suggest we take this further by going to Manchester
There you go.
because I've been to the Salford Labs Club to take a photo.
How cool. Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty cool. We should bring it up in the podcast. But my bandmates were whatever about it, but I was like, we gotta go because each time
Of
I go,
course. Yeah.
every time I go to Manchester, I go to some location of importance because there's so many great bands from there, and so there's always somewhere I want to go. And there's a million places we could still go to.
Hmm.
But I got to ride bikes around there, and we could literally ride bikes around the Salford Lads Club and remake a Smiths video.
I'd love that. I would love that. That's like a childhood fantasy.
I took pictures with the little kids that were at the Salford Lads Club because it's still open. It's still a boys and girls club,
Hmm.
and there's all these little Mancunian kids like acting nuts outside, and then we took photos with them, and it was really cute.
That is really cute.
Yeah.
Uh, so on the face, neither one of us has much trouble with this, other than maybe considering it silly. But if you want to have the context surrounding it, this came from an article in NME in 2007, and it goes like this: England is a memory now, he says in an interview with the NME published yesterday. The gates are flooded, and anybody can have access to England and join in. He goes on, although I don't have anything against people from other countries, the higher the influx in England, the more the British identity disappears. So the price is enormous. Travel to England and you have no idea where you are. It matters because the British identity is very attractive. I grew up into it and I find it very quaint and amusing. Other countries have held on to their basic identity, yet it seems to me that England was thrown away. You can't say, everybody, come into my house, sit on the bed, have what you like, do what you like. It wouldn't work. I feel like that's a fair and reasonable assessment from his perspective. Someone who grew up there and found it quaint and amusing. I think it's him just, again, speaking the truth. And what did he do? He didn't, I think, make everyone miserable about it. He said it, and then he moved to LA. He just left. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Well, okay,
what's the problem?
as a Smiths fan, I highly think that Morrissey, well, any fan should know this about Morrissey. He really romanticized the British, like, and especially the northern British and Mancunian lifestyle. So
Mm-hmm.
much portrayed in Smith's music and Smith's
Mm-hmm.
imagery, which is all from Morrissey's brain, and it makes sense. He's got a huge British identity that he finds attractive, and so of course that's why he feels that way about it.
Yeah, it just seems like the natural evolution of his opinion on matters. I mean, but hey, if that makes you angry, then it makes you angry. Everyone's, I think, welcome to their own opinion, but just don't cancel him on something like that. But there's
Well,
more. There's more, blurry stuff on.
things work is the moment that you say one thing, then people are looking for it in everything that you say.
Mm-hmm.
So like
That's
he's
for sure.
already like kind of nailed to the cross. You know what I mean? I get partially sometimes what Morrissey says, and then there's still the things where he does. It's almost like he's not accountable by saying he respects somebody from a political party, but that he's not political. And he does have these really strong political views.
He
Did you?
does, yeah, but they all seem to center around like aesthetic and animal rights, almost. Like it's almost like the way someone speaks, the way that appears, and the rights of animals. It doesn't seem to be like the anger-fueled politics that a lot of people get, jazzed up about taking rights away from these people, giving rights to these people. It feels like more like he has a vision that he likes that's getting disturbed or something like that. And then, of course, the horrific nature of animal abuse, And I think that's like the general crux of all his political statements, is that it's like, this person doesn't deserve a microphone. They're sloppy, or whatever. It's not like a race thing. It's like an aesthetic thing or something like that.
Yeah, go through the rest of the quotes.
Okay. So there's the last ones that have anything to do with Islam. And I can put them all together. There's 3 of them because they all come from the same question and answer here. So, on Theresa May and Islam, I recall her speech on Eid al-Adha and how she referred to it as a joyous celebration as millions of animals had their throats slit to mark the occasion. So that's quote number 1. Number 2, on halal meat. If you have any concern for animal welfare, for example, you cannot possibly vote for either conservatives or Labor, because both parties support halal slaughter, which, as we know, is evil. Furthermore, halal slaughter requires certification that can only be given by supporters of ISIS. And yet, in England, we have halal meat served in hospitals and schools. On stunned slaughter. If you use the term humane slaughter, then you might as well talk in terms of humane rape. So there you have it, the 3 quotes there. If you ask me, they're all very animal rights centric.
Which we should 100% expect from him as Smith's fans.
How
can you go to record called Meat is Murder and not still have that ideology? I kind of have respect for the fact that he still does. I'm vegetarian because I also love animals and I feel grossed out when I eat them. I don't know what happened. Something switched in my head where I just was like, what am I? Realizing what I was eating and just, I don't know. I have a privilege. It is a privilege to be a vegetarian, and I'm aware. And I have that privilege, and I live in a city that provides many options. So, yeah. I understand why Morrissey said that.
This is the last of the Islam references in the 35 Quotes article. And I think so far, you and I both, maybe we agree that it's not necessarily like an Islamophobic blanket that you can put over Morrissey. It's just the animal abuse within Islam.
Honestly, the most damning thing is supporting the For Britain Party. They are anti-Islam.
But is that why he supports them?
I just think getting behind any political party that feels that way is going to rope you in with that. So I don't feel sorry for him for people saying that because of that. I think he really fucked up, to be honest with that.
I don't feel sorry for him either.
He should have not chose a side. Like, the same way that you and I are saying we're not left or right. I hate that there's essentially 2 ways to be. And I hate that in America we have 2 parties to choose from because I don't agree with neither. Mm-hmm. And but those are the facts. And if you had to choose one, of course, I would say that I'm more left-leaning, Mm-hmm. But I also feel like sometimes the way that the left acts is really hypocritical. And I get annoyed at half the people telling me about oppressed people on Instagram that have never experienced oppression.
Mm-hmm.
From my own background, and that becomes my own resentment towards class issues and all this stuff. So I don't know. Morrissey really screwed up by that. The For Britain thing, I can never get behind him choosing that. I don't understand why he did that or supported Brexit. So I don't getting called names for that.
I don't think I feel bad at all or sorry for him whatsoever because I think he's a grown-up man and he can handle it. But I think you're right. I think you kind of have to go out on a limb a bit to defend the fact that he wore that pin because I think you have to draw kind of assumptions. You don't have like a crystal clear defense there, But I just, in my heart of hearts, I leave space. I leave a lot of space and I give him a lot of wiggle room because I feel as though he's an artist. He makes statements. He's someone that could have potentially just put the button on to give like a snub to the Conservatives and the Labor Party, and to somehow, in a weird way, direct people towards the issue of animal abuse in a strange way, you know, without having a PETA pin. Instead, it's like this pin and why, and then he goes into interviews and says it's...
His most opinionated views always come back to animal welfare.
Every time. Yeah,
definitely. Always. That seems like his first and foremost issue all the time.
Well, let me read the surrounding context from those three quotes, and then we'll be done with the quotes that have any sort of reference towards Islam. So the interviewer asks, what are your thoughts on the upcoming UK elections? Morrissey: they are local elections, but people use their vote with national party figures in mind. UKIP is dead, and Nigel Farage aided their downfall by supporting Henry Bolton. Theresa May was always a prime minister uninvited. She's incapable of leadership. She cannot say her own name unless it's written down on a cue card in front of her. I recall her speech on Eid al-Adha and how she referred to it as a joyous celebration, as millions of animals had their throats slit to mark the occasion. I wondered what kind of compassion she could possibly have. The answer is none. However, the Conservatives conserve nothing in modern Britain. In fact, they are the prime destructors of British heritage. Labour are no different from the Conservatives in that they do not object to FGM, female genital mutilation, halal slaughter, child marriage, and so on. There is no moral clarity with these people, and you shouldn't vote in a certain way simply because you always have. Do you have the nerve to vote differently? If you have any concern for animal welfare, for example, you cannot possibly vote for either Conservatives or Labour, because both parties support halal slaughter, which, as we all know, is evil. Furthermore, halal slaughter requires certification that only can be given by supporters of ISIS. And yet in England, we have halal meat served in hospitals and schools. UK law is pointless. John: will animal abuse ever stop? Morrissey: yes. Walk into any major supermarket and you will see how cow's milk has shrank into a small corner whilst alternative milks have taken over. Even people who don't care about animal welfare would rather have rice, oat, or cashew milk. The same has happened to eggs. It's very difficult to locate them now in a supermarket. Obviously, I wouldn't ever buy eggs, but it's worth taking note of these things. John: but halal is done in the name of religion. Morrissey: most murder is, but animals' rights must come before religion. Religion must cease to be the only word. I'm not interested in what people did 10,000 years ago. I'm concerned about what is happening today. John: kosher is also very cruel. Morrissey: very. It too must be banned. I'm not saying that that stunned slaughter is acceptable, because it couldn't ever be. If you use the term humane slaughter, then you might as well talk in terms of humane rape. People sound very stupid when they mention humane slaughter. John: a lot of people can't afford a vegan diet. Morrissey: I think the point is that we cease to put ourselves first. It is not about what we frivolously want. Every animal, even during slaughter, fights and kicks until its very last breath. It has one instinct, and that is to survive. I stopped watching television because of animal death commercials. I couldn't allow that into my living space for one more day. I feel liberated without it. They won't show cigarette commercials, but it's okay to show butchered lambs and to laugh about it. John: don't you ever wonder if your views have held your career back? Morrissey: nothing I say is provocative. They are just facts. So again, right. It's all animals' rights, it seems, for the most part, you know?
Right, absolutely. But the halal thing can only be done under ISIS. What is that?
Yeah, I'm not really sure the credibility of that statement, you know? I didn't look into that, but he did say that halal slaughter requires certification that can only be given by supporters of ISIS. So maybe that was... he spoke out of turn there, because I don't know if that's even something that you can verify one way or the other. It sounds like a slam for. I think he just has so much contempt for halal slaughter that he's just roping them in with ISIS in whatever like loose way he can, and kind of drawing a parallel there that there's just violence kind of a thing. But again,
this website, I read this, by the way. Also,
yeah,
from Morrissey Central, also accompanades photos of halal slaughter, which there's a really horrible graphic image of a bunch of men on top of a cow, like bleeding to death.
I have it right here.
Terrible.
It is terrible. I could see why that sort of imagery would be very disturbing to him.
Yeah, awful. I watched in a mid-'80s interview with Morrissey while he was still in the Smiths, and they talked about what changed him like this, and it was because he saw commercials when he was 15, probably by PETA or some animal thing, but he had no idea that the way that slaughterhouses ran or the way that works. And I think it's common that when food is presented to us, it's just like a meal. You don't really think about where it comes from. I know as a child, I never thought, I think I've told you this story because it goes back to Miss Piggy. When I was little, my brother being 6 years older than me, loved to, terrorize me. And I took a Polaroid picture of Miss Piggy on a plate with a knife and fork. I left it on the plate. And wrote on the Polaroid, when you eat bacon, you're eating Miss Piggy and all of her friends.
Oh.
And it never left me. And I wouldn't eat pig because of that. At a very young age, I demanded that I will not eat pig. And my parents, my mom especially being an immigrant and feeling like I'm taking shit for granted, and also sees food as a very sacred thing, that we have to finish it completely, was so upset and still can't understand why I don't eat meat now. That's from, different background and whatever. But yeah, I understand Morrissey's sentiments, but he's very, it's a little bit much because he brings so much religion and stuff into it. And then he hates those religions. And that does seem racist because he lumps in a lot of people. It sounds like ultimately his hatred comes from this.
I would like to put a pin in the Islamophobia scenario, right? Because we've gone over the quotes, and all of the quotes, it goes to the animal welfare, it goes now to female genital mutilation, and also goes to child marriage. So these are specific problems he has, right? And I don't think you can hold any one of those against him. I think it's obviously those are problematic things. I think your quote-unquote Islamophobe always comes out with the same kind of rhetoric, like the Quran is a book of evil, as the Quran promotes violence. He says nothing to that effect. He doesn't go into the burqa ban, women should not. He doesn't go into any of those type of Islamophobic stereotypical type of arguments. So I can't pin Islamophobia on this man, personally. I don't know about you.
Okay, my question is, well, we are probably not educated enough on this to either of us to answer this, I assume, because we're not religious people. But when it comes to Islam, how do we know that that's true, that female genitalia is always a part of that? Like the mutilation of female genitalia?
Neither one of us are experts on it, so I just did a quick Google. FGM, and it says here, people also ask, which countries is FGM widely practiced? The answer is FGM is practiced in 30 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. But Egypt, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and the Sudan account for about 42% of all cases. Migrants have carried the traditional practice with them to other countries in Europe and the Americas. And over here it says religions associated with FGM, mostly Muslim.
But then Morrissey's own quote is kind of like him not being knowledgeable enough about it himself, because
I mean, the only quote he made about FGM is that labor are no different from conservatives and that they do not object to FGM. That's all he said.
I'm sure they object. There's no mostly Western society is not going to be okay with that. It doesn't make any freaking sense. It's a very weird, like.
But there's a difference between not being okay with it and publicly stating it. You know,
Right.
and maybe he's correct. Maybe they don't make public statements on it. Maybe it's too controversial. I don't know.
Anyway, let's go further.
Okay, so that's what we got so far, right? We've got some quotes about racism, about Islamophobia, but then we can move on to the Me Too movement, the Weinstein, the Kevin Spacey type quotes. Those can obviously be very problematic. So on sexual harassment victims, if everything went well, and if it had given them a great career, they would not talk about it. That's the quote from the 35 quotes. Now, obviously very insensitive, but I think it's hard to deny that there are individuals that are willing to do anything for fame. And if they achieve fame, then it would be the price of it, and they're willing to pay that price. And if fame isn't achieved, then I would imagine there would be a lot of resentment and animosity, and maybe an attempt to claim sexual harassment or other crimes of a sexual nature. So, I mean, again, it's very insensitive, but I think he's making a point there. But let's look at the context. So what he said is, people know exactly what's going on, he reportedly said when asked about Weinstein, and they play along. Afterwards, they feel embarrassed or disliked, and they turn it around and say, I was attacked, I was surprised. But if everything went well, and if it had given them a great career, they would not talk about it. I hate rape. I hate attacks. I hate sexual situations that are forced on someone. But in many cases, one looks at the circumstances and thinks that the person who is considered a victim is merely disappointed. Again, it's not sensitive. It's definitely problematic, and there will be many people that there's nothing you can say.
There was famous people though who came out against Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
So Morrissey just saying that he sounds like an idiot to me about it. I like the way that the patriarchy is set up. There's no way that he has ever felt what women feel in terms of the power dynamic, and that, yeah, fame is hung over their head and they are expected to do things for it. Mm-hmm. I remember this band that I won't mention. It's a failed post-punk band from the late 70s that opened for big bands and never made it huge. And Sex Doll was playing a show with them. And one of the dudes was definitely hitting on me. And then he goes, oh, you're dating this singer? Oh, that's why you're the drummer? How typical. And this guy still hits me up on Facebook and invites me to shows that they're doing. Will randomly put me on the guest list because he's in Los Angeles, like as if I would ever show up. Mm-hmm. I did give him a new one because I had to deal with him for the rest of that evening. But I still think about that in anger. Mm-hmm. You think that because I dated the singer, I'm the drummer? Are you an idiot? I influenced the singer. It's like, you don't even give me credit for the fact that I showed this man how to play guitar or all the music that we reference. And it angers me still to this day. I made my own fame. The singer of the band didn't give that to me because of being sexually involved with him. You know what I mean? Like, I've had many jobs where I was sexually harassed. Remember, I think a long time ago when we lived together, I was working at this record store called Soundfix in Williamsburg. I don't know if you remember, but one of the guys that worked there smacked my ass right in front of the owner. And it was just accepted. Like, that was okay.
Yeah.
And fuck that job. I actually remember once coming in really late to that job, super hungover on other substances that made me nauseous. And I walked in late, and then I said, excuse me, and I walked outside and I vomited. And I'm glad I did. I walked back in, and the owner's like, you can go home. And I was like, good, I'm going to go home forever. I think you and I both lost our jobs that day and went to go eat at this old diner in Greenpoint. I don't know if you remember, by McCarran Park or something like that. I have a memory. I could be combining memories, but I have a memory of doing that and us both being like, well, fuck it. We both don't have jobs. Like you had left Gigantic, that film thing, and I had multiple. I had two record store jobs and a bartending job at the time. So losing Sound Fix was like whatever, fuck you type thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I then also worked at a bar in Williamsburg where the owner kept trying to buy me lingerie, and I would deal with it. Him getting drunk and saying this shit to me because it provided me a job that I didn't want to leave, and that job co-signed my substance abuse. So I was in my own selfishness for needing to have a job that allowed me to be a mess at the time. Older Melissa, during the Me Too movement, I felt very annoyed at myself for not standing up for myself in some of those situations because the patriarchy, I literally have been conditioned to accept that that's how I get treated.
Sure.
So I think Morrissey's statements with this, it's kind of bullshit that he says that.
I'm with you. It is, because he's focusing on a minutia. I mean, obviously, I think you can't deny that there are individuals that will do anything for fame. That's that's undeniable. There are people, we probably know people that would do anything. They would sacrifice a limb for fame,
Who just kiss the ass of my bandmates because they're the man in the band and they believe that they're from a position of social power in just one stupid city.
Right, exactly, And I think it's, foolish to stand on a soapbox and talk about that minutia, but I think the reason he did is because nobody really publicly was, and he is just someone who makes an observation and fills in the blank, And it's just unfortunate because obviously it's hurtful, and even those who did forfeit some of their souls for fame, I'm sure it comes with a heavy price tag in terms of feeling good about oneself and their own self-image. And so even those who willfully submitted themselves to creeps like Weinstein also are victims anyway. So, 100%. I mean, it's...
My point of saying what I said was because of that. It's because of the patriarchy, there is this thing where we feel at times there is no choice.
Right.
And because we don't have one up. Men do often run most things, historically, and still to this day. I mean, I worked at an independent record store in Los Angeles, one of the biggest in the world. I won't name what it is, but I'm sure people can put it together. They paid me as a woman who's older, with a hella record store experience, $1 less than a 21-year-old man that got hired after me, whose favorite band was Fall Out Boy.
Yeah.
How disgusting is that? I mean, that was like so insulting to me. And when I found that out, I went and asked every woman that worked there, how long have you been working here? How much have you made? Then I started asking other men, and all the women made less. Like all of them, every single one of them.
Yeah.
So even an independent record store, if they can pay you less because of the patriarchy setup, they will. So and this record store promotes peace, love, and equality.
Right, sure. Sure it does, yeah. I mean, there's definitely, a need for the Me Too movement, and there's a need for people to be aware of the things you're talking about, and I completely am on board with that. But I'm not on board with saying Morrissey is a misogynist or, someone who is vehemently against women, so to speak, because then, of course, he goes on to speak about Kevin Spacey and that victim, and it's in the same exact vein, right? So I think, at best, you can only say he's incredibly insensitive. I don't think you could say he's sexist or patriarchal. I just think he's incredibly insensitive to this particular subject, and it's probably somewhat related to his own sexual inadequacies. Yeah,
which I'd love to get into that at some point.
I have a great one in regards to that I was even, my eyes were open. I had not known this about him. It's from an interview in the 80s. And I was like, wow, okay, I had wondered about this for so long, but I never had any concrete evidence on it. So,
I said this is a good time to bring this one up.
Okay. On gender. It's hard to be a man. It's made to be hard, and I don't know why. I think it's easier to be a woman. The women's movement has been so successful. The men's movement has never been accepted. I think it's not wanted. And this is from 1992. And again, I think this is totally fueled by him having trouble and him wishing there were advocates for people like him. Because back in the 90s, there was no movement to support men who couldn't get it up or were, had a sexual inadequacy or whatever it might be, right? I mean, you're basically not a man, right? You can't talk about that sort of thing. So I think he was a bit scorned by that whole situation that he grew up in. But anyways, let's see what the context is. This is from Details Magazine, 1992. It's hard to be a man, he says. It's made to be hard, and I don't know why. I think it's easier to be a woman. The women's movement has been so successful. The men's movement has never been accepted. I think it's not wanted. I think the expectation that men be stoic and strong is so enormous that finally they decide that this is the attractive way to be. There's more to life than being macho. Such an ugly word, which is something that I realized at the age of 1. I asked him about the men's movement. He read The Liberated Man by Warren Farrell when he was 15, he says. So you can't tell me anything about it. Has he read Iron John? Never heard of it. He doesn't believe the Lollapalooza generation is reinventing masculinity or pop culture. It could just be a fashion, but I think it's a good one. I think Henry Rollins looks good. Very good. His poetry, I'm not very sure about. In his own quiet way, Morrissey has redefined manhood. His songs have captured the angst of male adolescence and turned his sensitivity into strength. He has stirred an affection in men of every sexual orientation, and despite his protests to the contrary, he has become a new kind of sex symbol. He speaks of love and sex in pronoun-free abstractions, but he is not so much sexually ambiguous as ambivalent. I read that you had your first sexual urge at 28. How is that possible? I made it so. It was just an aspect of my life that was never triggered or required. It's very strange and unusual, but I'm not the only person on earth who's like this. A lot of people never get asked. So you had an urge? What did you do? Well, I responded to it. So you had a shag, as they say? No, I didn't. Something less than that. But even if it may help other people, it doesn't help me to talk about it. Yeah, it could. It does hurt me that the absurd issue called my sex life has been so pathetic. I do feel like the strangest living oddity, or whatever those circus folk in the 20s were called. I've never, ever had what one might lazily call a sex life. Are you too shy to ask? No. And those whom I have asked have always said no, which is very hard to live with. And I've always felt that I was cursed, that I was never meant to have a sex life. And that is as true today as it was when I was 17 and wondering why. You've never enjoyed physical sensation? Once I did, and it caught me unawares. But if you're asking me if I've ever spent the night with someone in a loving way, the answer is no. I never have. Have you fallen in love? Yes, I have. But the association is with pain, because it's never been reciprocated. Desire is extremely excruciating to me, and as far as I know, that's all there is. I can't imagine response, and I can't imagine being loved by somebody whom one loves. But people must hit on you. No, that never happens to me. Even amongst your legion of fans? To be honest, I don't meet them very often. I wouldn't waste time standing around for gracious slaps on the back. I don't take to praise and fawning, because I feel that if you accept that, you have to accept it when someone calls you a pile of shit, which I also don't accept. The moment is the performance, and when it's over, the communication is over as well. Because all that you ever want to say to the people is in that 1 hour and 15 minutes. What is harder for you to say, I'm sorry or I love you? I love you. Thank you. But to return to the question, why is it so hard to say I love you? A lot of people don't want to say it because it's almost the final moment, the death knell of intimacy. A lot of people don't want to carry around with them the notion that you care that much. Are you still friendly with Michael Stipe? Yes, he's a very genuine person. He wrote to me for a while and I didn't reply. And then I decided to, and we met. We walked around Hyde Park, and that was the beginning. He wrote you a fan letter? Not a fan letter, an interested letter. The pop industry is full of people who are quite isolated. It's not some great community where everybody gets together at night and sticks custard pies in each other's face. It's unusual to get a letter, and more unusual to get a supportive letter, because even if other singers feel supportive, they do so in private. So I think a lot of Morrissey fans speculated on his sex life, and is he ambiguous? Does he have a preference? Who has he been with? And I always thought, it was just something he kept incredibly private. But here he is talking about it in detail in 1992. I didn't know that. It wasn't until he was 27 that he even had an experience, and that experience was just, from what I gather, him masturbating. And I think it's because of all of that inadequacy, all of that failure in his sexual life, that he has such a twisted view on the whole Me Too thing.
What year would that be? 27. I think he said he was 28 when that happened. When from what you just said, but I'm just curious how, because there's theories online about the breakup of the Smiths, and that possibly Morrissey expressed like that he was in love with Johnny Marr.
Maybe.
And there's theories about that, but it's like could be like fan fiction. You know what I mean? But I'm just wondering if that was the years. Well, he's 61 now. So let's see how old he was in 1987, which was the year the Smiths broke up.
Wow, you're doing the math there. Look at you, Sherlock.
I was 28 years old when the year the Smiths broke up.
Wow.
So actually, that fan fiction might be real.
Connecting the dots there.
Evidence there to that. So, yeah.
Look at that. Wow.
Well, because in Johnny Marr's book, Johnny Marr talks a lot about their relationship and how close they were. But the way that Morrissey always talks about it is like, oh, we never really liked each other, which makes no sense. Also, even just through like photographs and things. And also, Morrissey was clearly like obsessed with the music that Johnny Marr wrote.
Wow.
I think it's pretty incredible that they literally met, in a year to the day from the time that they met, they were on Top of the Pops playing This Charming Man, which I think is a pretty incredible amount of movement for a band to do in such a period of time.
I'm impressed by you putting that together, because I would have not strung that together. And you're right, I did say 28. His first sexual urge at 28. Wow.
Which is because at that point he was also like seen as like a sexual pop star. And I do like that the article brings up that he redefines the like masculinity,
manhood, yeah.
Because it's true. I think
with the whole pronoun-free abstractions too, that was way ahead of his time.
Right, and I think that's what Morrissey always represented to me when I was younger. Essentially, somebody who I identified as being like a queer person. You weren't sure where he leaned, and it didn't really matter.
It didn't matter, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that people gay and straight could relate to this person, male or female.
I loved it too, totally.
You know,
I loved it too because it gave me confidence when people would, come up to me in high school and say, "Are you gay?" And I would just say, "What do you think?" and just walk on, because Morrissey did set that precedent that it didn't matter and it shouldn't matter.
Right.
Nobody loved Morrissey because he was banging chicks or banging dudes or anything. It had nothing to do with it. But he was so well respected and so much admired that I thought, if you're going to have such a interest in that about me, then I'm going to let you know how incredibly ridiculous that interest is. It's like, you should be embarrassed for asking that question.
Yeah.
It
to me though that Morrissey claims that he didn't have any sexual urges prior to this age, when his performance-wise, he's very sexual. I mean, like the way he moves and swing around those like flowers and stuff, his movements are very sexual, and he's clearly like sexy person.
Yeah.
He had to know that because he's obsessed with people who look like James Dean, and he himself was looking like James Dean,
And his
So
shirt's always off. Yeah, I mean, he was a sex symbol. He knew that. He must have known that. Of course.
definitely. I actually wanted to ask you, was it 2004 that you and I saw Morrissey play with the New York Dolls at the Apollo Theater? It's 2004, right? It was when You Are the Quarry came out.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Had to
So
be.
do you
Yeah.
remember that you got a piece of his T-shirt and you gave me, like, we were both next to each other in like whatever that standing area in the front that they finally let, because everyone was sitting down at that
Hmm.
show. So weird. And then we moved towards the front. And you got a piece of his shirt and you gave me the piece of the shirt. And then I remember you also had some of the flowers that he had and you framed both of them. I was
Hmm.
hoping you had that.
I wish I did. The flower was probably the best thing because he came out on stage with that lilac hanging from his crotch, and I
Yeah,
couldn't believe that I caught it because the shirt's one thing, it's big, but the
right.
the flower was small, and I got it, and I was like, ah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I just didn't take care of it, right? I didn't preserve it well enough, and it just turned all brown, and then I think I uncovered it one day, and it was just kind of like ash, it was just smashed, and I
Right.
felt it was so painful to see it that I just got rid of it. Because what am I going to do with it now? Like now it's like a symbol of my irresponsibility. Like I can't look at it anymore. But somewhere I have the shred of the shirt somewhere.
Well, I remember you gave everyone different pieces of the shirt. But do you remember
Hmm.
when he took off the shirt? Because by this point, 2004, he's older, which is weird to think about that 17 years ago now, or almost, depending on whatever day that was. But I remember he took it off and then he ran off stage like covering himself.
I loved when I last time I saw him was in March. It was the last like public weekend before COVID. The next tour date was canceled and all the others were as well. And I remember he did the shirt thing, right, where he takes it off, but I mean he's older now. And there was an incredible amount of like smoke machine effect at the moment he took the shirt off. So you never really got to see his body, you know what I mean? And I thought,
Yeah,
oh, that's cute, you know what I mean? He's still up to throwing his shirt out, but he's hiding a little bit of his muffin top, I guess. I don't know. I thought that was cute.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, well, so I wanted to, and we're probably gonna have to like chop up, I guess, and get back to this. But you
Mhm.
had asked on a separate phone call that we would get into when was the first time that you heard the Smiths?
The first time I heard the Smiths, must have been when I was living in Chicago, and I think it was a music video. I think it was This Charming Man, and uh, I just remember I was in love with that music video and the song and the flowers and his movements, and I was just that was it. It was like love at first sight kind of thing. It was a video. I saw a video. I think is how it started for me.
Yeah, he's wearing like a pearl necklace in that video, and it's really smoky. And they're panning to the different, people in the band, but obviously the main focus is Morrissey and Johnny Marr because he looked very cool as well. But I think when anyone first sees the Smiths, what they first see is Morrissey,
Hmm.
um, just because his vibe and whatever.
For me, it
Uh,
was very much the visual. Like it was the music, but the visual too. The videos. I fell in love with those videos. And I think it all is summed up with the title, "This Charming Man." He was just so damn charming to me. He was so delicate and so sweet. It was just nothing I had seen before. Like it was we were mentioning, he like redefined manhood, and I ran with the ball. He lit my torch, and I was just like, I love this. I'm into this. I'm gonna take back rainbows and unicorns and flowers and all these things that are typically associated as feminine and not for boys. I'm taking it back. I'm into it. I like flowers. I'm gonna be proud about it. What about you?
well, I was asking how old you were when you saw this video because I don't know if I heard that far.
Ah, I'm guessing I was probably 15 or 16.
That's around the time that I got into the Smiths, but my introduction to Morrissey in any regard, well, my introduction first was to Morrissey. And I was just looking up this because it was a video that I also saw as someone who was watching MTV. So yes, it was 1994, The More You Ignore Me. It was the first that I saw. And I remember watching that video and my dad coming into the room and going, God, he's so gay.
I had one of those moments too.
I never forgot that. And I remember looking back at it and being like, okay. But I remember that video vividly because he's like wearing like a mesh shirt and it's like kind of a desert vibe or like
isn't that November Spawned a Monster or no?
No, I should have double checked that video because I'm pretty certain it was the more you ignore me.
I think you're talking about November Spawned a Monster if I remember correctly.
You might be right. So maybe it's not The More You Ignore Me then. Well, it was definitely like around that time in Morrissey's solo song. It's whatever the video is where he's wearing the mesh shirt.
I know it. I have the visual in my head, yeah. I have
the visual too. And I remember watching it and my dad walking in and saying, wow, he's so gay. And being like, okay.
That's hilarious.
Like whatever that means. I mean, I could tell he was gay. My dad's brother at the time, my uncle's, was very flamboyantly gay. So, I could tell the difference in that certain sense of like, this is a queer person. Didn't cast any judgment or whatever at that time because I wasn't raised in that way. But it's funny that my father had to even mention that. And then later on in life, when I figured out a lot of people that are younger than us aren't aware of the BMG Columbia House scam where you do the 1 cent.
Yeah, 12 cassettes.
Later thing, and you get like 10 CDs. I had gotten not Louder Than Bombs, but another like Smith's compilation best of, and it wasn't Hatful of Hollow either. It was probably just like best of one or something like that. Something really simple.
Okay.
And I remember my brother telling me, "Oh, don't get that. I tried to get into them. It's not that good." But I just ignored whatever the fuck he said, and I got it. And I remember it completely changing what I got into after that. Because prior to that, I had listened to, it was like Nirvana, then like Bjork. Then I got into pop punk because of my brother introducing me to pop punk. And that being the beginning of me going to shows at like 13 and 12 even was my first show going. And then, 14, 15, getting introduced to the Smiths. My mind was blown because the aesthetic even, it opened up a totally different door to all kinds of bands and music. And then even my interest of going to nightclubs, which is how I met you. Mm-hmm. So in some weird way, I feel like if I didn't go through that trajectory, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't even have met you at that time or whatever, because I mainly went to those clubs because of bands like the Smiths, because I knew I could do that stuff there. And that's what I wanted. And that really never changed. I remember feeling like the masculine energy from going to shows in Florida that all those like pop punk kids had really turned into these crappy macho like hardcore kids. And I just hated that energy. And I also wanted to drink. And a lot of those kids were like straight edge kids and whatever. So the Smiths represented this whole like, let's dance, be young, be free, be fun. Mm-hmm. And that's what those places were. And I feel like all of our friends, and especially people in Miami, were so into the Smiths. The moment they would play those songs in those clubs, we would all go bananas.
Oh, every time. Yeah. I had to dance. If it were Smiths or Morrissey, I had to. Yeah. Had to, for sure. But anywho, Morrissey, yeah, I mean, I've never met him, but I feel like we've made eye contact. Not the last show, but the show before that when I saw him in Hamburg. I had a sign with me, and I can't remember. I was trying to think of it today before we had our call because I thought I'd bring it up, but I can't remember what it said, but because it was something to the effect of like this whole truth thing. It was something like speak your truth, or we want more of your truth. And I held that up at a certain moment when the lights hit the crowd and he wasn't singing. And he looked and he made like a little smug, like kind of like look at me. And I thought that was special. We connected.
Well, I had technically possibly 2 opportunities to meet Morrissey when my friends played with him, the Hollywood Bowl, and if this festival was going to happen without COVID, but I have a feeling that he would have been really blocked off and that he wouldn't have cared to meet us. But who knows? Maybe this festival will actually happen and that opportunity arise. I mean, that would be incredible.
But I think so, yeah.
I wanted to get back to the Smiths because I wanted to bring up some points of when I don't know prior to this podcast if you were revisiting records and
I wasn't.
No. And I was just curious what some of your favorite Smith songs of all time have been and as to why.
Reel Around the Fountain to me is such a beautiful song, and there's just something about it that just makes me feel like emotional, you know? It's one of those songs that just like hits my heart.
You don't think it's the guitar melody? Because that one particularly to me showcases Johnny Marr's guitar playing.
I mean, a lot of credit goes to Johnny Marr. The only thing that rubs me about Johnny Marr is the silly feud of people choosing a side. I'm just like, God, you know, like one's better than the other. Come on, like it doesn't even matter. But if you're gonna push me to it, I'm gonna say Morrissey's better, which makes me sound like I don't like Johnny Marr. But of course I like Johnny Marr. Of course, he's so significant. His contribution is so significant to the Smiths. Everybody knows the jangly guitar. Come on. Yeah, Johnny Marr. Right. He gets cred.
He wrote those songs, and I honestly believe that, and you might disagree with this, that I still believe that no Morrissey record has come close to something like Meet His Murder. Like, there's just no way. I tried to revisit Morrissey records prior to this podcast, and I was just, the sound is just not there for me in the same way. They made magic together. And I don't know if you're familiar or if you listen to any of Johnny Marr's music that he made later, but none of it also comes close to the Smiths. He made a few records with Bernard Sumner from New Order under the band name Electronic.
Yeah.
You would think that would be good. And it's not bad.
It's not bad. No, it's not bad. But New Order's better. New Order's better.
What?
New Order's much better than Electronic.
Or the Smiths. But you think that, because even like, you know, they had the Pet Shop Boys sing on tracks. You're like, well, this is going to have to be gold.
Has to be. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
Which is kind of shocking. But my favorite tracks I've realized that as time has gone on, in terms of Morrissey's display, I think That Joke Isn't Funny anymore.
Also.
I love that song, and I actually think the guitar work in the guitar outro of that track is unbelievable. I also, by the way, to speak about How Soon Is Now, I read this thing where Johnny Marr talked about how hard it was to get that guitar that's doing that like backwards and then like reverbed out long. I mean, it's a famous guitar line. He said it took them ages to get that, and they almost gave up on the track, which is crazy to think about because it's one of the biggest Smiths tracks ever.
Besides,
and it so defines like the Smiths moving in like a larger direction. That song to me, you know, it's so like creepy. Like that guitar line is without it. I can't imagine that they could even recreate it live. He said that it's funny because now anyone could recreate that sound with an iPhone, and I thought this is probably true. People who made records back in the day at that time, to get certain sounds, they had to manipulate tapes and do all kinds of crazy shit. And now it's like, oh, my phone's got an app and it could run the guitar backwards. You know?
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy, right?
But I think Johnny Marr's guitar playing on Barbarianism Begins at Home, which is a track off of Meet His Murder, is the epitome to me of what makes Johnny Marr just the best and why he's like a guitar hero. Unbelievably melodic. I think that Morrissey's entire style of singing actually comes from Johnny Marr's guitar playing, and that he never stopped that type of style of singing because of it, because it became a signature sound that he did. When I listen to his solo records, I hear him still trying to do the same thing, but without that songwriting and that guitar playing, it's not illustrated in the same way.
It's
Like,
definitely different. Yeah, the Morrissey solo is not the Smiths. It's not a continuation. No, it's a break from the Smiths, and it's something different for sure.
yeah,
You don't have to like both.
yeah, the vocals are so great. It's just like, it's unfortunate to me that people can't get over feuds, because I think collectively for the people, I couldn't imagine how many more great records they could have made. I mean, I feel that way about like Nirvana and Utero. When I listen to that, I'm like, it's such a shame. It makes me want to cry, because there's so much more that could have gotten out of this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that way about the Smiths. But also, I mean, Morrissey said in a 1987 interview with, I believe, NME, he's like, it's time for this to be over, and this will be the stuff of, this is not quote unquote, because I can't remember, but the Smiths will be the stuff of like myths in the future. And he's right.
Yeah.
We're still weeping over it.
Mm-hmm.
We're still like,
Mm-hmm.
this is the greatest music ever made. But I mean, the greatest like music from the UK, like some of the greatest British music ever made. And
Oh, absolutely. I think in our lifetime, we can definitely be very happy that we were able to hear the Smiths and be alive. And
but even, I mean, I was a baby while the Smiths were active. I was born in 1983, so I obviously didn't hear the Smiths until sometime. Well, first hearing Morrissey in the 90s, and then personally getting into the Smiths in the late 90s on my own.
But you have heard Smith's covers at Morrissey shows, and that enough. That's like a blessing, you know?
Of course, definitely.
That's something special, I think. Very special.
Johnny Marr was playing guitar. I still don't think that the people that are playing those guitar parts are even doing it right. I was going to say, in defense of Morrissey's contribution with the Smiths, I think Death of a Disco Dancer really
Awesome
shows
song.
what vocal is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
Love
Also, lyrically, he's just, for his age at that time, super intellectual and like well read, and all these references to this and that. I mean, I'm 37 years old, and the lyrics I write are some of the dumbest shit.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Like,
I mean, the fact that you can hear clearly pronounced every word of every song, and that
right,
there's
yeah.
there's like nothing like silly,
Like,
or it's just beautiful. It's poetry. It's just amazing.
yeah, because I cover my stuff with distortion, delay, and reverb, because it's a mess, and no one should know. I have this couple people keep asking me for lyrics to this one song, and I'm like, I don't even want to send them. They make no sense, and they're so dumb. And
That's what Knight Zereb said. He said like the lyrics don't mean anything. He just thinks the words sound appropriate for the melody or whatever. You know,
that
it means
band's
nothing.
rhythmic, so it makes sense. Your vocals are going to be rhythmic with that. But
yeah, it's like an instrument at that point. It's not even about the vocals.
Well, I wanted to also bring up and possibly end this podcast by saying some of the stuff that Nick Cave said about this, because ultimately I felt that this was the best view on all of this. A fan asked Nick Cave, is it possible to separate the latter-day artist from his earlier art? More specifically, the fan continued, what are your views on Morrissey, both early days and his newer, more ugly persona? Cave advised fans to simply let Morrissey have his views, challenge them when and wherever possible, but allow his music to live on, bearing in mind we are all conflicted individuals, messy, flawed, and prone to lunacies. We should thank God that there are some among us that create works of beauty beyond anything most of us can barely imagine, even as some of those people fall prey to regressive and dangerous belief systems. And he basically goes on to say, when you put out a song, it's no longer yours, and it's left for the listener. And I believe that, and Cave also says he believes people who boycott art over the actions of their creators are only doing a disservice to themselves. 100% believe that. He, quote unquote, I respect and understand why people respond in this way, but can't help but feel it is of a significant personal loss to them.
100%.
Yeah, I really felt like that was the best way to respond to that than anybody has said.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, honestly, like, I'm a fan of the Silver Screen, you know? I love, Bogart and Errol Flynn and Cagney and Hepburn and all these, throwbacks. And, I mean, God only knows the atrocious behavior of these people back then. You know what I mean? Like if you have to cancel an artist based on their actions, then we might as well just snip off everything that was from the 20s and 30s and 40s. You know, like how could you possibly think those individuals were not flawed? You know what I mean? Of course they were. Of course they did probably heinous shit, you know, off on the side. And I'm sorry, that's too much of a price to pay to just dispose of those masterworks based on what they did in their personal lives. I'm not signed up for that. No way. Can't do it.
I agree. I think though that people's views right now with Morrissey's a living artist with a voice now. So I think that's where the conflict really comes. Because I did bring up to multiple people, well, you watch Roman Polanski movies, or
right.
You know, there's a lot of that, like, but I think because people like Roman Polanski don't have a voice anymore in the same way, people are disappointed by Morrissey because he still plays shows with these bands that are within the subculture. He's mainly a lot of Latin people love him, you know. So there's certain things that I guess people of color and people leaning towards left politics feel just disappointed by it.
Well, I'm going to say right here, right now, that there's no convincing me from anything that I read today that Morrissey is a racist. There's just no way. And I think that's what's thrown around most is that he's a racist, and it's just bullshit to me. 100% bullshit.
Who went through every single fact and every single article where these quotes came from. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he's a racist, but I do think that he's saying these sweeping statements about Islam that he needs to get more specific about, because when you make these statements, you're lumping it all in together, and that's a kind of unfair thing to do, right? So there are just aspects of that, yeah, I don't think he's a misogynist, and I don't think he's a racist, but I still question the Ford Britain pin. I don't know why he did that.
Yeah, I mean, he might be afraid of Islam. He might be. He might even have a phobia. He might not like it. But hey, a lot of people hate Christianity. A lot of people hate Catholicism. And I don't hold that against them either, you know? I mean, how many times have you heard people go on about the church and how evil it is and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you have a perspective that is reasonable because of the atrocities that are associated with that religion. And it means a lot to you, and it's very problematic that these things are happening and they're associated with that religion. So I think religion is something that is love-hate, you know? It's not really a neutral thing so much, you know? It's like either you're into it or you're like against it. And I mean, it's not a deal breaker for me, even if he is Islamophobic. No canceling Morrissey based on that. I'm sorry. I'm not Islamophobic, and I'm not... I don't hate Islam. I don't hate Catholicism. I don't hate religion. I think all religion serves primarily a positive force in the universe, and for most people, it's of significant good. You know, of course, though, absolute power absolutely corrupts, and those people in those high positions within the framework of religion, a lot of them are terrible and have a lot of problems. But I mean, religion is a blanket that covers millions of people, and most of them benefit. So for me, it's like, have your feelings about it, have your position on it. It's like credible on either side. If you love it, I understand. If you hate it, I understand. You know, don't hate the people though. Don't hate the people. You know what I mean?
Right. I will say, like, I personally, even though I feel spiritually connected to music, I don't expect an artist I like to have the same viewpoints that I do. Separate it. But I understand it's a controversial position to have at this point. But I think that this goes to show in terms of like cancel culture and what we talk about, that it's important to do the research if you truly love the artist rather than immediately canceling them and basing that hearsay is truth. Because I heard many people say that Morrissey was transphobic, and all the research that we just did, there was not a single thing about that.
No.
So it's interesting because I had said that because I had heard it. So it kind of goes to show that it's really important to do the research in it. And, you know, I think it's a shame for anybody to cancel the Smiths based on that, because still one of the most seminal bands in history, but still so important to what they represent.
Yeah, and please don't make it a trend, people, to cancel anyone based on a quote that is so simply out of context. I mean, bring back context, please. You know, like intentions. What are people really thinking and feeling? Not just a quote. You can't use they're using a quote as like a silver bullet. You know, it's like they're vampire hunting or werewolf hunting with a quote. It's not enough.
Time to read an entire article anymore. Nobody even gets news from articles and stuff. A lot of it, I think we are conditioned now as humans because we live in a social media realm. A lot of news comes from that. That's really fast articles, memes, and random stuff. Like I don't fault the people for the way that they deal with stuff now, but back in the day, you get news from an entire news article from the newspaper, you'd be reading the thing. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like we just take headlines and run with it at this point.
Pretty much. Like sound bites, headlines, yeah.
Yeah. So it is unfortunate, but
it is, because life is very nuanced, and nothing in the lived experience is so black and white as it's portrayed by the media, as if we're supposed to completely go to one side or the other. It's so binary. It's a 0 and a 1. It's not. There's so much gray area in between, and usually that's where the interest lies. I don't care about this extreme view on the left or the right of what they think of the other opposing force. It's more interesting to kind of be in the middle and listen to both, and get the nuance involved in it. And yeah, I mean, cancel culture, some people deserve to be canceled for sure. There are cancelable offenses, but definitely,
rapists and murderers.
Yeah, they're done. For me, they're done. Basically, you can empty the prisons and just leave those fuckers in there. Those are the ones that really need to be in there.
About that, if that's what happened. Like, it's just, you know what I'm saying? If that's the end result, somebody rapes somebody murders somebody, I don't really know how much more information I need to delve into.
Nothing. Yeah. It's over. Even if it's like act of vengeance because a horrific crime befell you, it's just, it's game over. You just lost your pass.
Right.
There has to be some type of offense that we can say, this is what you lose your pass. If you do that, you lose your pass. And those two qualify for me. They qualify.
Agreed.
Yeah. Otherwise, let's all have fun and learn from one another and enjoy the nuance and the gray area and explore the mysteries of life together. Learn from one another. That's what it's all about. Yeah, it's been a really fun conversation to dive deep. You had a great idea, and I had not looked so deeply into these things, and I'm glad I have, and I hope some people out there feel as though they learned something here as well. And
relevant to the things that are happening in this day and age. And I don't know, just revisiting the Smiths and thinking about my own comments in our previous conversation, I was just like, man, we kind of have to talk about this, because I was feeling really sentimental towards Morrissey, where I was like, how can I not enjoy this band's vocal or lyrics, because they make me want to cry and dance at the same time. I couldn't deny the way that the Smiths made me feel and their importance and their legacy. And I really wanted to delve deeper, because I feel like their legacy is important to future generations, and to cancel people from enjoying that based on a singer's comments and the hearsay around that, it just felt really unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm with you, sister girl.
All right. Peace, love, fight the power. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, you got it. Ciao for now.
Bye.